Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leiden International Film Festival. My name is Alexander Mouret. I'm the director of the festival, and with me today are Etienne Augé and Barry Fitzgerald. And they are joining us to talk about Spider-Man and Spider-Women and Spider-Pigs and things like that, as you will be watching a bit later in the cinema. We asked Etienne and Barry because they are, well, I would say professionals if it comes to superhero and the science behind superheroes. And we will ask them a couple of questions, but first I will let them introduce themselves to you. And let's start with Etienne.
Hi, well, first of all, my name is Augé, Etienne Augé, not Augé. I appreciate the German pronunciation, but it's Augé. I'm very happy to be, I'm principal lecturer at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where I teach mostly international communication, film studies, and also science fiction. And I'm also working very much on superheroes. And I'm French and a little bit Swiss.
Thank you. Barry.
Hi, so my name is Barry Fitzgerald. I'm working currently as a science communication officer at the Eindhoven University of Technology. But in addition to that, I'm also a big fan of superheroes. I do a lot of research on the science behind superheroes, trying to figure out what they're all about. Written 3 books about superheroes, have a YouTube channel called The Superhero Scientist. I have a podcast just about to start. It's going to be called Secrets of Superhero Science. So I live, eat, sleep, and drink superheroes.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. So I think we have a very good crowd to discuss the film Spider-Man. Let's start with Spider-Man as superhero. Is Spider-Man a classic superhero? Etienne, what do you think?
Well, I think Spider-Man was sort of designed mostly for younger crowds, so he doesn't have the dark side that most superheroes have, like Batman or even Superman. So he's not really a classic superhero. He's more like a superhero light. He has great powers, also great responsibilities, I heard. But I would say he's really designed for a specific audience. But most probably Barry disagrees with me.
Let's see.
I disagree with some of what you said. The character, I think Etienne has just said there, yeah, it differs from the darker characters that you see in many of the films. But Stan Lee, who was one of the main creators of the character, wanted to have a character that a particular audience could relate to at the time. So it was 1963 when Spider-Man first was featured in a comic book issue. And he wanted a character that could resonate with the audience who were reading the comic books. So predominantly that was anyone between the ages of 12, 13 up to 18, 19. So high school students. And he wanted them to have a hero that they could relate to. So it really was a case of somebody coming along and saying, I'm going to design a hero that can directly relate to the people who were actually predominantly reading the comic books, and not have some middle-aged man, who was the case in many of the characters, who perhaps might have been kind of cool for some people, but they would have thought, well, they have different problems that I have. They don't have to worry about homework. And suddenly now they have a character, Peter Parker, who has to worry about homework and projects and, you know, about all the problems they had to deal with.
But you use the term. Yeah, that's the thing. You use the term hero. He's not technically, well, he is a superhero because he has superpowers, but there's not a lot of mythology related to Spider-Man, in the sense that he's a modern hero. He's a modern hero for mostly teenagers, but he also doesn't have the mythological depth that some superheroes can have. Like Superman, if you speak about Superman, and you know we can speak about Superman for hours, there's a lot of mythological dimension to Superman. He really represents something that is even greater than him. When Spider-Man, like you say, is just a cool young hero from the 60s, was wearing sneakers and has a problem with acne and girls and whatnot. Well, Superman doesn't have acne. And when it comes to girl, it's a different story.
Well, I also think it's very difficult to directly compare Superman and Spider-Man, or Supergirl and any of the spider-related characters, because Spider-Man, in my opinion, he's more of kind of a street level hero. I put him in the same bucket as Moon Knight or as Daredevil. Those characters who operate at the street level. What Superman or even Captain Marvel, they're often out in the galaxy, moving planets and rearranging solar systems. They're just totally different scales. So
yeah, but the question was, is he a classic superhero? That was the question.
In the
And
sense
so he's
of,
not a classic superhero.
at the length scale, which I use in something from physics, at the length scale at which he operates, I think he's a classic superhero. But you put him into that bigger arena, I think he becomes a little bit lost. So you have him there fighting beside Thor, as we saw in Avengers Endgame, or you have him with the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think he's a little bit out of his depth.
But let's get back to Spider-Man. If we look at this film, do you see any kind of difference in evolution if you look at Spider-Man? Because there are obviously a lot of Spider-Man films, and I think this is one of the last ones. What are the most important evolutions in this character, and are there any?
Barry, you take that one? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, from a scientific point of view, so I'll feel it in two senses. Scientific point of view, clearly, as science advances in the real world, the science that's included and engineering in the films also advances. So if you compare Spider-Man from 2002 with Tobey Maguire to the Spider-Man Homecoming, the difference in technology, difference in science, and how they use it is incomparable, to be honest. And in Spider-Man, in fact, that 2002 film, they took kind of an easy way out in terms of the spider silk, one of his iconic powers, by actually having the character produce it from his body in 2002 film, which isn't how it's done in the comic books. But then back in the Tom Holland iteration, they went back then to the actual spinning the material from a web slinger that he would have built or constructed on his arm. In terms of how the characters evolved, the thing that I mentioned earlier on, all of the problems that the character would have engaged with as a teenager, you still see them in all of these films. Even when you have Andrew Garfield playing the character who's completely not believable I think he was 31 or 30 playing someone who was, 17 or 18 years old. Quite a good Spider-Man though, not really a good Peter Parker, I think. But the character, I don't think much has changed in some terms of the narratives, and maybe Etienne would also agree with me on that. And it's always this. It's kind of always the same thing. He ends up having a fight with a mentor.
Very true. Well, very, very, very true. But for instance, if I don't know if you will agree with me, I would say with a father figure, in a sense that since we know that Peter Parker is an orphan, he was raised by his uncle and aunt. It also kind of makes sense on a psychoanalytic level that is also, the whole mighty Oedipian complex, whatever. In that case, he wants to kill the father. So the father figure is also very important.
I'm just thinking on the fly here is that, well, you look in the earlier films, he really just had this relationship with the mentor who turned out to be the villain. So that would be, the lizard, Dr. Kirk Connors. It would have been the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. It would have been Otto Octavius. But in the more recent films, so the ones in the MCU, you actually see he has two mentors in each film. So in Homecoming, his mentors are Tony Stark, who he's affiliated with. And in a way, kind of, maybe you could say that there's some sort of connection with Adrian Toomes in The Vulture. In the second film, in Far From Home, definitely has two mentors because he interacts with Quentin Beck quite a lot in the film. And then there's Nick Fury. And I wonder if they'll do the same thing in the third film where they'll have a mentor. And I believe that the rumor is it'll be Doctor Strange who will be his mentor. And that might actually lead into Spider-Man and the multiverse, which is what we're talking about with this film.
Yeah. I actually wanted to go there now. So this is exactly, so it's Spider-Man and the multiverse. So what we will see is Spider-Men and women from different dimensions.
Spider beings, let's call them those.
Spider beings, sorry. Yeah. That's the preferred nomenclature. So how is that done from, I think, two ways? A question for Barry from a scientific point of view. So what is that something that we can explain? Is that something that's based on anything related to actual science? And I think a question to Etienne would be, what do the different dimensions represent if you look at this film? So let's start with science, Barry.
So I suppose the whole film is based on the premise of there being multiple iterations of the universe that we live in. And in each one of these universes, there's a different iteration of the character: Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, Spider-Pig, Spider-Noir, or whatever you want to talk about. In physics terms, the whole idea of parallel worlds and multiverses is theoretically possible. It's been theoretically explained by many people. John Wheeler is one person who has worked on it. And it all comes down to choice. So every time you make a decision, whether it's yes or no, for example, whether you're going to have a beer with your popcorn or whether you're going to have a soft drink with your popcorn, apparently the universe splits. So in one iteration, you make the decision of having the beer, and the other one, you actually have the soft drink. And that's what theoretically happens at not only at the macroscopic level, at the world we live in, the big world, but also at the quantum level. So there can be quantum fluctuations, and every time there's a decision or a fluctuation change to be made, the universe splits. Now that could lead to infinite possibilities in terms of the universe. Mm-hmm. In terms of the multiverse itself and traveling in between all of these different iterations, there is no empirical evidence to suggest that the multiverse exists. However, there are theoretical gateways that are postulated, and that would be, for example, something like a wormhole. So we know black holes exist, and many people think that when a black hole collapses and when you go through it, you'll actually end up passing through a wormhole, which may bring you to another part of the universe, so a shortcut, or alternatively, bring you to another version of the universe that we live in. And this is a vehicle that is going to be used more often, I think we'll see in the films in the future. Mm-hmm. I, as a physicist, think if you do it in the right way, it can be really good, really strong, really powerful, a piece of scientific technology or toolkit in your story. I think Etienne might have alternative thoughts on that. And so scientifically speaking, in theory, what they do, mm-hmm. It might actually be possible.
Okay, cool. And now we go to Etienne. So we have different spider beings from different universes. What, from kind of a more humanities point of view, why would they do that? Why is one Spider-Man not enough?
One answer, profit, in a sense that if you have more versions, you make more profit. And that's also what happened Marvel, DC. Whenever you sort of reboot a character, you want to attract either a new type of audience, newer or anything. So the first thing is profit. The other thing that also is linked is if you look at mythology in general, you can see that if you take a very classic work of mythology, King Arthur, you have at least 14 different versions that I know. Sometimes he is a Roman general that is sent to pacify England sometimes. So the idea that you also can have different versions of mythology is not something completely new. So I think it's once again a very nice combination of both. I think there's never just one reason. I think the multiverse indeed is a way to attract different audience by providing different type of story for different segments. But indeed, anyway, on a more mythological level, you always have different versions for mythology. If you speak also about Greek mythology, about Thor, for instance, we're debating with Barry, something that most people find super boring. Is Thor the protector of 10 realms or 9 realms? It depends on the mythology and so forth and so on. We can go on for hours. So 2 words, multiple mythologies and profit.
Perfect. Thank you. And very quick question. All the different spider beings that we will encounter in this film are actually based on actual comic strips or other films. Nothing is new.
All of the characters that are covered in the film are all based on comic books. So there's a comic book about Spider-Pig, there's a Spider Noir, there's Spider-Gwen. There is the Miles Morales character who is prominent in this film, in fact, very prominent in this film. And in that case, also is hinted at in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well.
Thank you for that. And I think as probably the last thing, we're going to watch this film now. What would be your suggestions, just a couple, to our audiences to kind of broaden their view of superhero films? Because obviously, I mean, we are familiar with Spider-Man, with Batman, with all these films that are also now Avengers. What are other things that people who are interested in superheroes and maybe a bit of different kind of superheroes, what should they watch? Maybe in cinemas, maybe on Netflix, maybe on other platforms. What would you suggest?
Well, Netflix, there are too many things on Netflix, and well, the quality is always unequal, but One thing we agree with Barry, because we speak quite often and usually we disagree. We do disagree quite a lot, but the one thing we agree upon is The Boys on Prime, which we like very much. Especially the first season was really good, very adult, very provocative, very wow. Second season a bit less, but that's usually the case for second season. So let's not be too picky. But I would say, well, I'm not exactly a huge fan of the MCU. I think it's a bit repetitive, and so I always recommend if people do not like the MCU but would like to know more about superheroes. One of my favorite movies is Watchmen, which I think is still one of the greatest movies about superheroes. And I would say maybe my other superhero favorite is The True Batman by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton as Batman. And for me, they are still the best Batman. Far better than the Christopher Nolan's versions, which just don't do it for me at all. But I think The Boys is still on Prime, and it's a very good. If you watch Spider-Man's Multiverse and then you watch The Boys, it's a very interesting cultural shock for you. You go from a very teenage universe to something that is, I wouldn't call it adult because that's not the world I live in, but something that is definitely darker, but darker really in a sense of gory, sexual, so not really Netflix, I would say, not really cut for Netflix.
Okay.
I would also agree. I think The Boys is fantastic just because it shows a side of the superheroes that you don't necessarily see in Marvel or with DC productions. However, on Netflix, I would disagree with Etienne and say if you're going to watch anything on Netflix, the Daredevil series, season 1 to 3, in particular, season 1 is fantastic. That character now has transitioned over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's quite likely that you'll probably see Matt Murdock in the MCU. My prediction is he might be Spider-Man's lawyer in Spider-Man, the upcoming Spider-Man 3 film, whatever that's going to be called. In terms of the MCU films, I love The Winter Soldier, Captain America the Winter Soldier, because it just plays out as a spy film. If you were told that no one in that film had superpowers, you wouldn't have known that anyone had superpowers in that film. Because it really just, okay, maybe enhanced abilities, but there's nobody with a flying hammer. There's no one with a mythological story. It's really a war film. It's a psychological war film and spy film. It plays out like something like that. And I don't think, is there anything else that you would recommend, Etienne, that's just outside?
Yeah. I just thought about it because I was talking about the Watchmen, the movie, which I still think is very good, but the TV show also on Prime is amazing quality. I think that Prime is really like very quality kind of TV show. They have some of the finest TV shows I know. Netflix is more unequal, but Watchmen, actually I learned a lot of things about American history watching Watchmen. And I think they got a lot of awards recently, and I think it's very well deserved. And I hope that Amazon Prime will give me a bit of money for praising their work so much. I hope so. Give them my email address, Alex.
Well, I'm going to praise Netflix one more time as well, because Umbrella Academy, I thought was really good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah,
very good graphic novel originally too. Yeah.
Well, I think we have enough tips. I think probably you can go on forever if it's my thought. I asked you. So Etienne and Barry, thank you very much for all your comments and explanations and your thoughts about this film. And I would like now just to thank you once more. And for our audiences, please enjoy Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.